a lot of times people aren't thinking about and aren't consciously aware of what they're afraid of. You are afraid of the judgment. Yep. You're afraid of failure. Yep. But you're also afraid of living a life that's meaningless as fuck. We all are. We all have those things that we're afraid of. But how you act is up to you based on which fear you choose to dictate your behavior.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to episode number 71 of the Conscious Cast. I'm your host, Cal, along with my other boy, Mr. Swole / Ankle Hurt, Mr. Jason Scalora. Oh, was that not the intro you were looking for? Or? Whatever.
This is not as advertised.
Oh, it's as advertised.
Trust me, it's not. If anybody that's watching that knows what I look like, knows that, like, that's ridiculous. Anyways, Cal and I have taken fucking God knows how many times to try to record this. We're like giggling and laughing, whatever.
Yeah.
But what we were going to talk...
We're back, baby.
Actually doing this time.
It's been several weeks since we've been back in the studio. But yeah, we are married, and the wedding is coming soon. Ooh. But yeah,
it's not the only thing coming.
How you been, man?
Good. How are you?
Going back to what we were saying before, like when we were.
You don't know about this yet.
You don't know. Yeah, you don't know about
second, third, fourth, fifth time recording.
I think it's our fifth time recording. But going back to what you said before, I think you should give a little background on breaking the rules, right? Breaking both internal rules and external rules, right? Internal rules being your own comfort zone, and external rules set up by authority, culture, and the like.
Yeah. Essentially what I was thinking about was over the past, year or so, I've learned to just send it. Literally.
Yeah.
Because there's so many times where we just assume that since everybody else is doing something some way, or everybody else is following some rule, or everybody else is staying within the confines of this box that they think in, that we have to as well.
Yeah.
Right? And the example I give was the one from today. I went to the dining hall, and they were serving quesadillas, and there was cheese, beans, and potatoes, and that was it for the quesadillas, for the guy that was making them. And there was a couple of people that turned around and said, I don't want the quesadilla because there's no chicken, but it looks pretty good. And it did look really good. So I was like, you know what? I want it too. And so for a second, I was like, fuck, like I can't get any chicken on my quesadilla. And then I was like, wait a minute. There's chicken on the other side of the dining hall. And so I just asked the dude, I was like, hey, if I bring over chicken, can you cut it up and put it on the quesadilla? And he was like, yeah. That was it. Like, that was it. I just went to the other side, got a piece of chicken, brought it back, and he made it. And it was fucking delicious.
Yeah.
And those other two kids didn't get it because of their minds. They were just stuck in this box of like, the TV says that this is all you can order, and looking in front of me, all there are potatoes, cheese, and beans, so that's all I can get on my quesadilla. Not true. You just didn't ask. You just didn't send it and figure it out. Am I always going to get a yes? No. Maybe it was against the rules for him to put chicken on the fryer or whatever. Yeah. So maybe he would have said no, but he didn't. But I would have never found out if I didn't ask. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. But it's such a small, stupid example, but it applies for everything in my life. Like, there's been so many opportunities where, like, I'm just figuring things out because I just ask. I just go for it. Like, the room we're in right now is just because I asked. I'm not trying to blow smoke up my ass. I'm just saying, like, I just asked the question. Hey, you run the radio station room. There are microphones in there. I don't know how it works. Can we record a podcast in there? Is that a possible thing? Yeah. Can I... My original idea was I'm going to go start a podcast club, to try and get funding so that we can get microphones and a setup. And I asked the lady, and she was like, we actually already have that on campus. Wow. And I'm like, what the fuck? Yeah. Like, that's just because I sent it. Like, everybody assumed, like, if you want to do a podcast, you have to do it all on your own. I just asked the question. I just sent it. I was like, let's try and figure this shit out. And it just worked out just because I asked. Sometimes I get rejected, sure. But, like, you never find out unless you ask. Just send it and stop thinking in this confine of the box that you allow your mind to be stuck in.
Yeah. And a lot of times, like you said, we assume what outcomes there are, right? And we assume that all the outcomes have been laid out in front of us. And like I was saying before, that internal box is our comfort zone, right? Because I know for me, I'm an individual that very much does not like to go outside the rules, right? When it comes to, especially talking to authority, and when it comes to someone that's, I guess, in a sense, in that specific area above me, right? And I have to ask them something that may cause, that may be outside the boundary of acceptance, right? And like, I just ask. Right? I just ask. It's just a simple question that does no harm except to yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And like literally, let's take this meditation thing, for example, right?
Yeah.
Like I said it on the podcast earlier this summer that like, oh, and like, wow, this is actually really funny because it's like a double-edged sword because I asked about the opportunity and I got it in the works, right? But then I never brought it up again, right? I never brought up that possibility again because I was too afraid to just ask, right? And now that it's not completely out of my hands, but now that opportunity for me to possibly become like to teach meditation at the place that I work is no longer an opportunity, right? At this point in time, like meaning like I could still ask, I could still do all these different types of things, but the essence of that story and like in the past was since I didn't ask and I didn't continue to see what outcomes are actually possible, right? By like reiterating that type of question, I only did harm to myself in that specific situation, right? And I knew the outcome was there. And I think this is interesting too, because a lot of times, and you could take us back to the example too, even when people ask, right? For them, that's just the verbal side of it, right? The action side of it, they don't even do because the action may feel even more uncomfortable, right? And that's 50% of the battle right there, right? Asking the question and then actually following through with what, if that possibility is a possibility.
And I mean, it ultimately just comes from a fear of rejection or fear of failure.
Absolutely.
That's all it is. It's just fear. But again, and this is, I'm beating the deadest of horses right now, but you got to decide what you're going to be afraid of. Because for me, I'm more afraid of living my entire life not having found out my full potential. So to me, that serves as a priority of a fear I'm going to act on over the fear of rejection or failure or not succeeding or being judged or whatever. And so that dictates my action, not my fear of judgment or failure. My fear of regretting my whole life when I'm 9 years old, looking back saying, I took it easy. I allow myself to pick which fear I'm going to be more afraid of. Rather, I allow myself to pick which fear I'm going to act on because I am more afraid of regretting my life than I am afraid of the fear of judgment. More afraid than I am of failing or whatever. And so I act that way. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes that fear gets to me. Sometimes my ego takes control. I'm not fucking perfect, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
But the more times you can live where you're prioritizing that fear, the fear that's going to serve you, the better. But people dispense with that long-term fear because it's not here yet. Or
so do you think that fear will always be there?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. It's just your decision on what you're going to allow to dictate your behavior.
So you fear judgment, right? Yeah. You fear rejection. Or like, I'm not saying these are all the possibilities. Yeah. So just ask. Fear of potentially not living up to your full potential, right? Yeah. And then you estimate all these fears, right? And then you ask which one is worth it, right? So like if you're in the situation where like you're just asking for something that you know would be a great opportunity to take you to the next level, and in your example, you may feel that fear of rejection, right? But let's just say you feel that immediate fear of rejection, right? Like someone similar to myself, you willingly choose to replace that fear with another fear of not living up to your full potential. Is that what you're saying?
Pretty much.
Okay.
It's not that it's replaced. It's just you just pick which one you're going to act on.
Okay.
Like, it's really that simple.
Okay.
It's like, how often are you thinking about each fear? Because a lot of times people just aren't thinking about it anymore. A lot of times people aren't thinking about and aren't consciously aware of what they're afraid of.
Yeah.
You are afraid of the judgment. Yep. You're afraid of failure. Yep. But you're also afraid of living a life that's meaningless as fuck. Yeah. We all are. We all have those things that we're afraid of. But how you act is up to you based on which fear you choose to dictate your behavior. It's just that simple.
Yeah. So you choose the perspective that you hold in relation to the fear.
You choose the actions you take based on the fear that you choose to dictate.
Okay. That
you choose to allow to dictate.
Would it come first with that perspective, though? Like, you choose the perspective, and then the actions follow as a consequence?
Choose the perspective. just feel like
because that's kind of what you're doing in that circumstance.
I'm not sure how it relates to perspective.
Because it seems to me that when you feel a fear of rejection, right, in that moment, I'm just trying to break down how you change from a fear of rejection to a fear of not living up to your full potential.
But
for instance,
both of those fears are there the whole time.
So it's the same fear.
No.
No.
Both of those fear. My fear.
So
fear of regretting my life and my fear of rejection. Are there simultaneously. All the time.
Okay. Gotcha.
You just pick which one's going to dictate your behavior.
Okay. Gotcha.
I guess that is a shift in perspective, but I would just
no.
It's more so a shift in your actions.
Okay. No. So I thought solely it was like a fear of rejection, and then you switch the perspective to being like, oh, if I let this fear of rejection overcome me, right? Like then I won't be able to live up to my full potential, right? Instead of having the perspective like, oh, I should just stay in my comfort zone and not ask because of this fear, right? I thought it was more so like that. I didn't know it was like a simultaneous fear that you felt at the same time.
That's the blissful part, is that you're fucked. Either way, you're fucked.
Yeah.
There's so much bliss in that. It's so freeing. You're gonna lose no matter what. Nobody gets out alive, dude.
Yeah.
Nobody gets out alive.
Yeah.
This is a game you're all in on, whether you'd like to be or not. All of your chips are on the table. You know why? You're a human being. You have an expiration date. What are you going to do with your time? I don't know. Yeah. It's not up for me to decide. But if you're going to allow the fear of failure, the fear of judgment, the fear of not being liked from people to dictate how you're going to handle yourself, the decisions you're going to make, what you're going to do, the people you're going to help, how you're going to serve this world, then you're really missing the point.
Yeah, and it's like it really comes back down to like the fear gets in the way of people's purposes, you know? And a lot of times, like, whatever end they really want in their life, like whatever goal they really want to strive after, you know, it seems as though like they have these interests, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times they don't know it's their purpose until they're in that pursuit, right? Like, you're not going to be like, my purpose is video editing and not have like any experience in that area, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think once you engulf yourself into that area a little bit and you see a path that could be even more meaningful, a path that could take you to the next level, a lot of times for people, myself, you know, like it depends on who you are, and like naturally people so there's some people that are just naturally ask questions and just love to just oh my God, let's go. Like I'm ready to climb the ladder. You know, I want to learn as much as I can, you know? But there's a lot of people like in my circumstance where they're just like, okay, I'm going to go with the flow, you know, and I'm just
can I ask you this?
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
What is like, because from my perspective, my fear that like is like my kryptonite fear is my fear of judgment. I don't know. What is yours? Is yours like not being liked?
Yeah, in a sense. And like not making people feel not making people feel uncomfortable. I think that really keeps me within my boundaries. Yeah. So,
but do you think that further than that is because you want to be liked?
I think those go in conjunction with both of each other. Like,
I'm saying, what's the deep? Because there's got to be a core reason.
So I think this is what I was going to touch on before, and I think it's like it really depends on, because when you're in that state of like that fear, you're thinking of a future scenario, right? When I'm in this type of state, I'm just so, and I'm not saying this like an egoic way, like I'm just so presently focused on the activity at hand. And this is a bad thing because I lose sight of the future, right? I lose sight of those goals, those aims, like where I'm really going, right? And when people ask me, Cal, what are you doing with your life? Maybe this is why I've had such a hard time, right? Because I have a better idea now, but like if you ask me where I'm going to be in 5 years as compared to Jay, like he has a much more concrete answer than I do, right? But to be fair, right? Like I have learned a lot, right? I have grown a lot, you know, in this area. But it just shows that difference, because if you're more, present-minded, right? You're more focused on the short-term fear rather than the long-term fear, right? Those are going to have different consequences, right? The different consequences being that short-term comfort zone satisfaction versus the long-term payoff of utilizing that fear to catapult yourself farther along that path, right? So it's really I think I'm much more of a short-term fear person. I think you're much more of a long-term fear person.
Yes and no. I mean, you're disciplined as fuck.
Yeah.
Like,
I think in those specific scenarios.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Fair.
In those
that's
specific
fair.
scenarios.
Okay. Because I was going to say,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
looking at the big picture,
with those boundaries,
you're overwhelming more afraid of the long-term thing.
Yeah.
Which is what we're defining as healthy.
Exactly.
As healthy.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
I was gonna say.
I just mean in those specific areas.
Like
I should have known.
If I'm giving one prime example of someone that's more afraid of the right things, it's you.
Gotcha.
And that's kind of interesting though, because if you're, again, going off the basis of there's no shit-free path, you're gonna be afraid of something no matter what you do. The people who act on healthy fear, aka the people who act on their fear of regretting their life rather than acting on the fear of being judged, are the people that are disciplined. And so the way that you show that you're acting out the right thing is through discipline. It's through doing the things that are uncomfortable now and the trade-off for a better life in the future.
Absolutely. Yep. There you go.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, dude. No, that literally fits that perfectly.
Because it's exactly the same thing. Like, I'm not afraid to. I am afraid. I go up to the guy anyways. Despite the fact that I'm afraid of rejection or the fear of looking stupid or whatever, and ask him, hey, can I go get chicken and bring it over here? Because I'm foregoing the immediate fear of being judged, of being not liked, of being, turned down.
Yeah.
For the long-term fear of not knowing what if. What if I actually could have got the dinner that I wanted to eat?
Yeah.
This case, it's dinner.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem like a big deal.
No, but
that's a training ground for when it's time for you to fight for a career path that doesn't exist because they tell you, we can't do this here. That's not how we roll. Sorry, it's not an option. Let me talk to somebody else. That's how that's going to manifest. But that's because I have repetitions of asking the guy, can I put chicken on my burrito? Yes? Cool. No? Cool. I asked. So now I'm acting out the fear of long-term regret. And the more I do that, the more I'm going to understand that, okay, hey, I got told no, or this isn't how things are supposed to work. I can't be, I can't be a life coach for some sort of business. Can I not? Or are there ways around that?
Yeah.
Or are there ways around that? Like,
Yeah.
figure it out.
Yeah.
But the second I go there and see that it's not listed as something that you can do because of X, Y, and Z, and then I act on the fact that that's just the way things are, you're fucked. Because you're acting on the short-term fear of...
Yeah.
Because it doesn't take anyone with an IQ of above 60 to realize that maybe there's another way.
Yeah.
You're just afraid to act on it. You're afraid to ask the questions. You're afraid to pursue it because you don't want to look stupid and you don't want to be rejected, which is reasonable. But the fear of dying with regret is there as well the whole time. All of them are there. You're fucked no matter what.
Yeah.
You need to burn that into your skull.
Yeah.
Because you're fucked no matter what. Geez, now what? Well, you may as well choose the meaningful path. If you got to choose one, there's no not choosing. You can't just stay in no man's land. You'll just be drifting on the path of acting on the fear of rejection and failure and whatnot. Pick one. I'm doing my best to consciously pick the fear that's going to bring myself meaning and make the world a better place. But it's up to you to decide. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Yeah. And you make the choice, right? Like you're the one that makes the decision.
100%.
And a lot of times, like when we face this fear, when we face this like kind of false evidence appearing real, right? We're just it's about those trade-offs because, like you said this one time, like everything you're always trading short term for the long term, right? There's always going to be a trade-off, right? No matter what, there's always going to be this exchange of present actions now and future consequences later, right?
Or inactions.
Or inactions, which are actions.
True.
So,
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go for it.
How was because you're definitely a lot better, and like we were talking about this beforehand about how you feel more comfortable to, essentially risk being liked by me to tell me how you really feel.
Yeah.
What has been the change in that? Is it just that you're closer with me? Do you
I think it's definitely part of it, but I've definitely
because I feel like so many people battle with that desire to be liked by people. Their ego gets in control and says, I have to tell everybody what they want to hear all the time so I can be liked. But that's your ego's desire to be liked by everybody. But how do you get past that egoic drive? Or maybe better yet, the fear. How do you get over the fear of being disliked?
Well, I think it definitely takes time. You know what I mean? And it's not something that happens overnight. Like, and I think definitely too, it depends on the relationship you're operating in, and it depends on who you're interacting with.
Yeah.
But I think as you begin to normalize that type of habit in your life, right? Like that type of
what habit?
That type of communicative habit of telling people in a rational and proactive way of how you truly feel, right? Then it will be a lot, just like when you're building any habit, right? It's the hardest at first, but once you begin to start to do it, right? Then it becomes easier and easier and easier, right? But how do you overcome that fear? How do you overcome that initial hump, right?
Yeah.
It sounds so cheesy when I say this, but you really have to make the decision. But I think people a lot of times get it twisted, right? Because they think telling people how it is often is tied to a negative characteristic, right? Because like, oh, I'm gonna tell you how it is, right? Like I'm gonna break down the wall for you, right? Like I'm gonna, you know what I mean? Like, but it's just about, you could say it in a way that's not harmful. Like one time I was working with someone and we were interacting with customers, and they were pretty much just telling, like, being not operating in a tone that was appropriate for the circumstance we were in. And so like a couple days go by and I just tell them, I'm like, in a proactive way. And I've never told this person like how it is before. It's something they needed to hear, right? It was like something new that I just met. And I told them, I was like, hey man, I know just to jog your memory, a couple days ago when we were interacting with those customers, when you're using this type of tone and you're communicating in this type of way, it can display this to the customers and it can lead to negative consequences that we don't want, you know. And just I just broke it down for them in a way that was not harsh, you know. It was definitely uncomfortable, but it's what they needed to hear, right? And it doesn't have to be negative, right? Just because something is uncomfortable doesn't mean it has to be negative, right? And just because it is uncomfortable, right, that is a negative. But once again, it comes back down to that short-term versus long-term, right? Like, because if I don't tell that person how they're communicating, they're going to keep on doing that, right? But if I tell them and I offer that piece of advice, they're most likely going, or maybe not most likely, depends on the person, they're most likely going to adopt that piece of advice because they know, according to your relationship, this is not your normal way of speaking with them, right? Because like, I'm not normally telling this person how I feel, right? But when I do, it's going to be kind of like out of the norm, right? Of me offering that piece of advice of what they need to hear, right? And so through that, they'll actually listen to it more, right? And they'll adopt it into their own way of life. But if I had the fear of not being rejected, or of staying in my comfort zone, right, and not telling them, I'm actually doing more harm by not actually offering that piece of advice to them.
Okay. So based on what you're saying, it seems like what you've done is you've broken down your fearful events all the way down to the smallest possible event so that you could actually say what you want to say. Maybe you don't tell somebody overtly. Maybe it's your best friend has an addiction and you need to confront him about it. But your fear of being disliked is preventing you from helping him or having that uncomfortable conversation. Maybe that's not the first problem you could tackle. But what you could tackle is telling your coworker how he needs to address, you know, customers when they walk in.
Yeah.
You do that enough times, you'll be strong enough to do something a little bit harder than that.
Start small. Start small.
You'll be strong enough to overcome a slightly bigger, fearful situation. But you keep doing that, like a muscle, it'll grow. And then eventually you'll be able to handle situations that are way bigger. But the fear will still be there. You'll just be strong enough to overcome it. That fear is going to stay here. No matter how much you try to change the fear, it's always going to be there. Always. You can't change it. Inchangeable. What you can't change is your level of courage. And once that's higher than any fear that's in front of you, you'll be strong enough to do it anyways. But it's still there.
Yeah. And I would say once Okay, that fear may still be there, but you won't feel it as much, right? That courage, like you said, will grow over time, and that will overcome that fear, because eventually, like, you can flip the script, right? Like, you can, like, maybe something you're like, oh my God, bro, what the fuck? Like for instance, me posting on social media, right? Like, posting about my YouTube channel and stuff like that. Like, at first I was like, what the fuck, bro? Like, I don't want people to like see my YouTube channel and yeah, exactly. Fear of being judged. This is a perfect example, right? Fear of being judged. But as I began to normalize that, right? Maybe just by first posting a little clip of cinematics, right? Not like, you know, just kind of like keeping it a little vague, right? And then like slowly over time becoming more comfortable, and like it takes time, right? And that fear begins to dwindle, right? Like I don't even fear that. I don't even feel that fear anymore, right? So you don't feel it anymore. And
yeah, that's weird. I don't feel it anymore.
Yeah, exactly. It just becomes so normalized in your life, right? But when people normalize fear, right, and they normalize all these things, and they're afraid to especially break rules that seem unbreakable, right? And they have rules within themselves, right, aka conditioning, habits, and behaviors that they aren't willing to break either. That is an equation for a shitstorm, right? That is an equation for no progress, right? But it first starts with you, right? Because those external rules will never change unless the internal rules in here change, right? So if you can begin to change the internal rules, aka being willing to step outside your comfort zone, you will begin to ask questions that may allow for you to change rules out there, even though it may be hard.
Right. Damn. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. It really does come down to choice.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Which is weird because it's like, it's almost like, how do you teach that? Yeah. It's the basis of all knowledge. Of like, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Yeah.
I can give you the best advice in the world, but if you don't want to hear it, I can't help you. Yeah. So it's like, I don't know what to tell you if you don't actually want to change.
Yeah. And I think it's important to note that me, especially, like, I am not by any means perfect at this, right? Like, by no means, right? Just because I know it conceptually does not fucking mean like I put it into practice 24/7.
Me neither. Clearly.
To do it, but like, because a lot of people would see this interpretation and be like, "Wow, these guys know it."
When Cal and I talk about that, it's from a very hypocritical state.
Yeah. Yes.
It's yes, we act on it as much as we can.
It's hard to do.
It's a work in progress.
Yeah, dude.
Knowing something and choosing to act that out are two very different things.
Yeah, man. And especially recognizing this. Like, we've had so many conversations that are like an encyclopedia of like, that can help so many people. Like, objectively speaking, really, it really could. Yeah. But when it comes to us, the people, the sources of the information, it's barely helping us, right? Like, dude, just think about that for a second, right? That's fucking nuts. So what we're saying right now, you may only be able to take 1% away from. Think about all the classes we take. Bro, I've taken how many classes? Like,
dude, it's crazy.
30 plus classes. Yeah. I've taken like 35 classes in college. And I don't remember jack shit.
Me neither.
From any of them.
Anything.
So
nothing.
We are walking hypocrites, right? Like, we literally, every single person is, right?
You saying that makes me feel like I have like just a piece of dust floating around in my brain right now.
But no, that's just the reality we operate in, right?
Yeah.
Because it's impossible to completely live by there's only so much we can understand, and there's only so much we can hold in our conscious minds, right?
Right.
Therefore, the more we're able to expose ourselves to this type of information, the more we're able to take in this type of stuff, the more likely we'll be able to actually use this information in real world scenarios when it actually matters, right? Because that's when it actually matters. Like, this is it's cool to have conversations like this, right? Totally cool. But if we're just talking about it and not being about it, it's like, what the fuck, dude?
Doesn't mean shit.
It doesn't mean shit, dude. It doesn't mean shit.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Fuck.
I mean, that's yeah. If you want another hard truth, that's a hard truth, you know. But I mean, if we could just, like I said before, if we could just be aware of this information, then and just be able to. And Aaron Doughty says this best. He's like, 50% of the issue is just being aware of it, right? If you could just be aware of it, you're more likely be able to identify it in your life, and then be able to start making baby steps towards that end. And when I said before, like you're only most likely take like 1% away from this, you could take a lot more away from it, right? Yeah. It really does depend.
It depends on what you decide to do with the shit that you know. It's like, I don't know, David Goggins talks about it a lot. He's like, everybody's a fucking preacher, but nobody's a practitioner. Yeah. Everybody sits there and knows all the things. Like, I love talking to people that know a lot about exercise, but are massively overweight. I have those conversations a lot more than I thought I would. Like, they talk about, like, fitness and all this stuff, and I'm like, that's great, but, like, it's clear you don't have, like, if that's the body you wanted to have, it's a different story. Yeah. But when it's evident that you don't have the body that you want, but you know how to get there, which is everybody, eat less, exercise more. Congrats. Yeah, calories in, calories out. Start running. Ha! So difficult.
Walking.
Easy as fuck to know. Yeah. Very different to be somebody that actually practices that. Yeah. And so I don't know how to teach that. Yeah. I don't. That's what I'm getting at. Is I don't know how to tell you that. And I'm also not going to act like just because I actually act on things that means I act on everything. Yeah. Right? Because I will tell you everything I can tell you to try and make your life better. That doesn't mean that I always use it and I'm a fucking saint, a god amongst men. Yeah,
that's important to know.
Because I know better. Yeah. Yeah. Doesn't mean I'm always the best.
Oh, dude,
right? Yeah. Which also means that since I'm flawed and you're flawed and you're flawed and you're flawed, then we should all take what we can from each other and learn what we can from each other. Because the more you try and dispense with what somebody says because they're not coming from a place of they know everything or this isn't a reliable source, so you're going to close your ears and go la, 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 the less you're going to be able to take out of whatever they're going to tell you that actually could help your life. I'm not saying you got to take what I say as gospel or you say as gospel because we're, so smart and fucking geniuses on spirituality. Yeah. But despite what you think somebody knows or doesn't know, listen to them. Yeah. And if you don't, then you're the one that's missing out.
Yeah, and just, I think, too, it's so important to not let your ego get caught up in this stuff because it's so easy, especially for people in our position, like, and just really any type of industry you're in, right, that others see you as, like, kind of like a beacon, as, like, a mentor, right. That they look to in order to gain further knowledge, based on your own experience. It's so easy to be like, I know it all.
Since you're coming to me, I'm perfect, by the way.
I'm perfect. I never make a mistake.
I don't know if you knew that about me. I've actually never made a mistake before in my life. I'm not afraid of judgment because it'll never happen.
Yeah. You think, and you really can start to believe and convince yourself that you're just this perfect being that knows it all.
Which is a flaw in and of itself.
Yeah, dude. Literally. Yeah. And I think it's just so important to be aware of, especially when it comes to matters like we were talking about today with fear, right? Yeah. Especially when you're trying to make progress in any area of your life in general, and understand that it's going to take time. It's going to take baby steps, and you're going to have to be the main leader of your journey. So I think that's a great place to wrap up this episode. So, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe on this YouTube video. This has been episode number 71 of The Conscious Cast. I'm your host, Cal, along with my other boy,
Jason Scalora.
Where can they find you, my man?
They can find me wherever you want to find me. Come to my house. I'll give you my social, my address.
Not TikTok.
Not TikTok.
Yeah, buddy. Lightweight, baby.
Fuck you.
Yeah, all right, guys. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe.
Love yourself because I love you.
I love you. And we are clocking out, people.
Stay handsome.
And we are clocking out, people. Peace.
And we are clocking out, people.
Okay. All right, ladies and all right, ladies and gentlemen, that has been episode number 71 of The Conscious Cast. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe on this YouTube vid. I am once again your host, Mr. Cal Boris, along with my other boy, Mr. Jason Scalora. As always, love yourself because I love you.
Stay handsome.
And we are clocking out, people.
Peace.